Hey, welcome to the Clive Barker podcast. This is episode 53. So to continue my trend of recording these intros from weird places, I am driving an old chest freezer to the dump while I record this. So episode 53 is Cabal, and I have to apologize. We were supposed to record this a week earlier, and we didn't because I had some family stuff going on. Just to kind of let you know, my dad retired and moved to Panama a couple of years ago, and anyway, this story sounds totally crazy, but these people came in on horseback and broke into his house in the middle of the night while they were sleeping, and they actually tried to kill my dad with pillows by putting a pillow over his face, and they had machetes, and one guy had a gun, and there were 5 of them, and they robbed my dad, and eventually, because my stepmother, begged them, they let him live. So anyway, all that happened last week, and I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't, I really like to reread these things because it's been like 20 years, 15 years since I've read Cabal again, so I really wanted to reread it, and I didn't finish because I couldn't concentrate, but so it took me an extra week, but I did get it done. So that's what happened there, and then there's a kind of an awkward moment in this recording where we're talking about when Decker breaks into people's houses and whether it was better when he killed, in Cabal when he killed people with a gun, or if it was better in Nightbreed when he used the knives, and we were debating that, and all of a sudden it kind of struck me funny, because of what happened to my dad. And everybody in Panama owns a machete. It's not a big deal there, but yeah, I don't know. It just made me uncomfortable. So anyway, there was lots of news, lots of listener questions. So this was a really good episode. There's just that one sort of funky moment at the end there, but episode 53 of the Clive Barker podcast, Cabal. Welcome to the Clive Barker podcast, episode 53, Cabal. And I know we say Cabal a lot, and we've talked about Cabal a lot indirectly, but this is our first time going over the book itself, and not just to talk about Nightbreed or the Cabal cut.
It's going to be interesting. We've been rereading the book, and it's a return to the beginnings of my fandom, because I think this was the first book I read. But
and speaking of Cabal, the Fiddleback annotated Cabal book, it's available to buy. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's like, hey, here's where you can order it. And I had even forgotten that this thing existed. And David reminded me that, it was, I think, 2 years ago that they had news about this on Revelations on Phil and Sarah's website.
Wow. And was it that far?
I think it was, yeah. But unlike other special editions where you pre-order them a long time back, in this case, they just here's something we're working on, and then all of a sudden, okay, bam, now you can buy it 2 years later. And I was talking with Mark Miller about something, Occupy Midian related, and he's like, hey, so how come you're staying up so late? I said, I'm trying to get Cabal read before our next episode. And he said, well, that's good timing because the Fiddleback annotated edition is out now. And I said, yeah, that's right. And he said, did you know there's only 300 copies of that?
Yeah, I saw that on his Instagram. He posted a photo of the book, because this came out in September 16. Yeah. So And he posted a picture on Instagram of the book, and he was saying, "Oh, it's so pretty. It's a beautiful edition. It's only 300 copies."
Yeah, and he's like, "We only got 3 of them," or something like that.
Well, I got one.
Yeah,
I got one. So it's.
Man. I wanted to buy one.
For the limited edition that it is, 300. Yeah. It's a pretty sweet price. It's $40.
$40, and it's a hardcover, and there's and numbered only 300.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great deal.
Is it numbered though? I don't know if it's
numbered. I don't know why they wouldn't, but maybe it's not. I just assumed.
Okay. I don't remember reading that it's numbered, but the 300 comes from actually Mark Allen Miller, so yeah. He actually said it was 300 copies. So that makes it even sweeter. When I read that, I was like, "Oh, sweet! Yeah. I got a pretty rare copy." I thought, makes sense because
it didn't advertise very much. So
and
you people out there might still have a chance to get one because it sort of came in under the radar.
Oh yeah, but you got to hurry because
only 300. Yeah, it's cheap.
It's been doing the rounds, and it's relatively cheap. Yeah. So the people who are fans, I'm sure that they know about this already, and they're probably buying it right now. Yeah. So it's only 300, and it's go get one now. Yeah. But save one for Ryan because he'll buy one in the future.
Yeah, I hope. Maybe I'll end up getting it from eBay or something.
All right.
And
you might be able to get it at a cheaper price. Who knows?
Yeah. Let's see this. So there's been some news about Scarlet Gospels that Clive's been saying on Facebook, and I read most of the. I went to Revelations again because just to make sure I caught everything, and there were some comments that he made to people that were telling that that I never saw. Because I read the main things, but I don't read all the comments because you'd be there forever. But the first thing he said was, "I thought you might like to know that the Scarlet Gospels, a large novel which sets Harry D'Amour against the Hell Priest Pinhead, is finished and has been delivered to my agent. I don't yet have a publication date for it, but as soon as I do, you'll be the first to know. I won't say anything about the narrative except this. It's a horror novel with the graphic violence and perverse eroticism of the most intense tales from the books of blood. Please feel free to share this news with any friends who might have been wondering about the book. The Scarlet Gospels are finished." And of course, he means finished like he finished writing them, not that there's the whole publication process.
Right, yeah. I saw that too when it came out, just like minutes after it came out, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I shared it immediately, and I was very happy about it because it's a book that I've been waiting for a long time. I mean, people out there who are in my Facebook circle and circle of friends, they know how much I've been waiting for this book. And to the point that sometimes I might be a little unfair in my criticisms that, I want this book to come out. Why isn't it coming out?
Well, I think all the fans have been waiting for it. And it's weird, when you read his comments, a lot of them were like, how long I've been waiting for this book? And it's like, you should say we, because, we're all fans.
Yeah.
I mean, not everybody knew about it since the 90s, but... or the late 90s, I think was it like 98 or 97, something like that, when he first brought it up, the Scarlet Gospels, as the short story collection.
Yeah, it was supposed to be first mentioned in 94 as something that was going to come out the year after. And, so.
Yeah, it was a short story collection. It was also, Scarlet Gospels was also at one point going to be the name for a book of erotic fiction, erotic short stories.
Yeah, I heard something about that.
Yeah, and then the short story, and then the story, the Pinhead story, which we all knew it was like the Death of Pinhead story, became the Scarlet Gospels because that story got so big that it went out on its own to become a novel. And then the short story collection became known as Black is the Devil's Rainbow, Tales of a Journeyman.
Which afterwards became a collection of poetry.
Yeah, only recently.
According to Alex, Clive's assistant.
Yeah, and I think Clive posted on that too. I mean...
Yeah. He did announce that the Black is the Devil's Rainbow is going to be a poetry collection.
Yeah.
And that Alex was helping to edit that collection of poetry.
Yeah. And then And then, of course, everybody's asking, once he says that, everybody pounces, and they're like, all right, I want it right now. And he said, unfortunately, I can't even speculate as to the publication date of the book. It's out of my hands, depending on the scheduling of other books and on the publisher's list. In my experience, it never takes less than a year from delivery to street date, but it could be longer. The point is, it's fruitless for me to try a guessing game because there are so many variables in play. I would ask you only to know that the book is on its way to the stores, but beyond that, I can tell you nothing. And
right.
I mean, that's anybody that's waited for one of his books to come out should know that that's how it works. I mean, I don't think that Abarat 4 is even going to come out in 2014, even if he finished it tomorrow.
Right, and there's a discussion among some fans, which is all speculation, but there's a discussion about who is going to publish Clive. Is he still being published by HarperCollins?
Right,
Does he have a publisher? Why is Cabal coming out by Fiddleback and not by HarperCollins? I'm sure there's got to be something around there, but I have no idea what's going on with his contracts. I know that once he was trying to put out a book, and then he said that, the publishers backed down on it. It was supposed to be a photo book when he was doing his erotic photography, and he was very upset about it. And then he mentions in an interview with Phil and Sarah Stokes, he mentions that the HarperCollins, they decided to drop his adult projects and just finish the contractual obligation with Abarat. So there's, because he didn't provide enough novels that were in his contract. So there's probably something going on there.
Well, and Cabal was Poseidon Press in the United States. And who published it in the UK? Do you remember?
I think it was Harper. Wasn't it Harper?
I don't know.
Think my paperback, I think, is from HarperCollins, the one where Laurie and Boone are escaping Midian and with that little beautiful frame around it. That's HarperCollins.
Okay. So HarperCollins did have the right to... I mean, because I thought they had started with The Great and Secret Show with Clive Barker.
Probably, or Weave World or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think Weave World was Poseidon Press.
Well, my copy of Weave World is the UK copy. It's from HarperCollins. All my books are HarperCollins except for the Books of Blood, which are from Sphere. Okay. And the Damnation Game is also not from HarperCollins.
Right. But so all the first editions were various places until a certain time, right?
Sure, I guess. Yeah. I don't think the American first editions are preceding the British first editions, though.
Well, and I don't think a strange limited edition book like the Fiddleback one, Cabal, is something that's kind of in HarperCollins' wheelhouse anyway.
Right. I know that sometimes these things, when they're like small limited runs, there's probably some kind of, they probably allow that for some kind of licensing fee or something. So I'm sure there must be something like that set in place for this Fiddleback edition. I
love these little obscure releases of things like there had never been a hardcover of The Hellbound Heart, and then all of a sudden, that wasn't all of a sudden. It did take a long time to come out, but that hardcover of The Hellbound Heart, the 20th anniversary?
I think so.
Yeah, and that was great. I mean, because me being someone that doesn't really like to collect paperbacks, I will if I have to. But
right, but these things are completely different. These are like much more valuable than a paperback.
Yeah. So finally, there was a hardcover of that you could put on your shelf next to your other books of the Hellbound Heart, and now there's going to be the Scarlet Gospels, which I only have as a PDF file. That's going to be amazing. We got Maximilian Bacchus, which, maybe we've read excerpts of it, but none of us had read the entire book.
Maximilian Bacchus?
Yeah.
I have both the uncorrected proof and the hardcover book with illustrations.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Now we have those.
Right, yeah. So
I mean, because of these limited run, things that are not HarperCollins. We're getting all of these great collectible things, collectible stories that are kind of rare.
Yeah, that's true. They're making it possible for fans to have access to these, some of some of Clive Barker's Juvenilia, book of essays from Phil and Sarah. Yeah. The whole story of it's kind of like a story of Clive, not so much a biography of Clive, but also more of a biography of his career with the books that Phil and Sarah are putting out, Memory, Prophecy, and Fantasy.
Mm-hmm. And their Abarat companion book.
And the Abarat companion book that had like an expanded edition. So these are all beautiful things to, help keep the fans entertained while, Abarat is being completed and before we get into any other projects. So.
Right, and Scarlet Gospels will come around maybe around the same time as Abarat 4.
I'm just going to say that maybe I would have preferred if the short stories would have all come out in one volume instead of instead of being released like one small short story in a small hardcover that's going to cost like, I don't know, $30 or $40. And then there's going to be another short story that's going to be published, and it's going to be another different book. And I guess I would...
I think it was getting too big.
Probably.
But I mean, like the Tortured Souls can't be more than 30 pages altogether. I would think that they would want to put Tortured Souls and Infernal Parade together in one volume.
That would make sense to me. Yeah, thematically they're very close to each other, so that would have made sense to me. But their decisions, their editorial decisions. Yeah. I'm sure they have plenty of reasons to do so.
And I'll get them either way. And actually, what was the one that recently was announced? Revelations. It's the Revelations bookend stories.
Right, of course. Yeah, the Revelations, the one that take place when all those gods come to life and all that. Yeah,
Chiliad.
Yeah, Chiliad, a meditation, and Chiliad something. So, sorry, I forgot. Yeah.
So to sort of wind this all back, we were talking. We were originally talking about who's going to be publishing Scarlet Gospels, and I think whoever gets it is going to be lucky because in a way it's sort of Clive's comeback into horror, and it's got a famous character that everybody knows him for. Even non-Clive Barker fans may end up buying this book. So if HarperCollins really turns this book down, I think they're foolish.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens here.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah,
I would rather the book be published by a publisher who actually wants to publish it than someone who's just publishing it. I really shouldn't say anything about this. I have no idea what.
I'd like to see it. I'd like to see it get the proper. Instead of being a limited run, I think Scarlet Gospels deserves to have a huge run and lots of promotion and stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that it should be, like you said, it should have a long run, and who knows, maybe I'm pretty sure that's what I was going to say. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it would make a fine movie because according to what we know about the Scarlet Gospels, it's going to be pretty monumental, pretty epic,
and we don't call it Hellraiser 10, we call it the Scarlet Gospels.
For God's sake, no. I honestly, as a Hellraiser fan, I'm the first to say Hellraiser's dead.
Yeah.
Long live Hellraiser.
They murdered it with that last movie, didn't they? I mean,
they did.
And now it's going to leave a bad taste in people's mouths for so long that by the time they get around to another one, Doug Bradley won't have any interest or won't be,
Doug Bradley hasn't had any interest in being in a Hellraiser movie for quite a few years now. He even sells T-shirts saying, no remakes, please. Please, it's a waste of good celluloid. And, and he sells those in his website. So he's very active and vocal against Hellraiser movies without him.
Yeah.
Which is understandable, but also without a decent plot and a decent...
and I keep coming back to the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, which I can't remember anything from it. And it's like is that what we're gonna get?
It was like seeing Rorschach after it had been terribly burned.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and then Clive goes on with. I'm assuming this is a comment to somebody. Or wait, actually, he says the demore of the Scarlet Gospels is steeped in very visceral and at times scatological horrors. And then he says this one I think is a comment in response to somebody. He said, "There's nothing in capital letters in the Scarlet Gospels which has already been published in the Hellraiser comics. Why would I insult my readers by recycling a piece of narrative?" So that, I think, to be fair, when the Hellraiser comics first came out, I asked Mark Millar about this too, because it's like, whoa, you got Pinhead and you've got
Kirsty becomes Pinhead,
and you've got Harry D'Amour in the same story, and Mark Millar was writing it, and Mark Millar had been, steeped in the Scarlet Gospels in editing. So I think it's not that unreasonable of a question to ask. And
sure. That was posted as a reply in Clive Barker's Facebook.
Yeah.
It which was also moderated by Alex. So it might have been Alex or it might have been Clive. I don't know. So. And
that was when Mark explained to me that the comic books have their own, or exist in their own continuity, and the movies have their own continuity, and novels have their own continuity, and they don't mix.
We always bring this up whenever we talk about Scarlet Gospels and Hellraiser.
Yeah, we do.
It's true. Yeah. It's definitely a different continuity. So, we don't really talk much about the comics, though, and I would just like to make an aside here to say that the comic books from Boom Studios, they've been really amazing. I've been enjoying them a lot. I've been reading them in, trade paperbacks, and I've enjoyed them so far. But I have to say that at this point, I am getting a little disappointed with the writing and the directions that they're going. Because, for example, the Dark Watch, and if you're listening to this and you've never read these comics or you intend to read them, then you probably want to skip this part because I'm going to say something that's a big spoiler in case you've never looked at a cover of the Hellraiser The Dark Watch. But in The Dark Watch, they have picked up Harry D'Amour, which is such an iconic, such a big character in the Clive Barker universe. And they turned him into Pinhead, like they did with Kirsty. And I thought, that when they did that to Kirsty, that was innovative, that was bold, that was exciting, that was oh wow, that actually makes some sense.
Well, and there was a large narrative setup to that lasted over something like 10 comic books.
Right.
Yeah, and so it was that was a long drawn out plot that Pinhead had to make that happen.
Right. And I was like, okay, what, they kind of lost me with that. They kind of lost me with that because I'm like, you can't do that to Harry D'Amour. It's such a waste to just turn him into Pinhead. It's like you're not being original, you're just anyway. I just wanted to vent this out a little bit, that I'm a little disappointed, and I hope that this...
I think I just have the first 2 or 3, because of money, I haven't
right.
I've gotten behind on those in the Next Testament, and I need to get back into them. So if you're listening, Boom Studios, we would really love to get review copies.
Yes, we would, actually, yeah. That would be nice. But like I said, I was kind of disappointed. So now I'm putting my hopes into Next Testament, which is, being written by Mark Millar. And, it's having some fun so far, Let's see where this goes. I'm really expecting the story to pick up a little more. Yesterday on Instagram, I noticed someone was asking Mark, so Mark, what's Next Testament Volume 1 going to be like? And he said, well, it's going to be Volumes 1 to 4. From Next Testament, so they're gonna publish a trade of the first 4 issues. That's going to be Volume 1.
That seems pretty early.
I know. It's. I think so too. But there's nothing really that happens. Nothing much that happens in this story-wise in the first 4 issues. It pretty much takes place in the desert, then it takes place in a dinner, and then there's a plane flight.
Usually, that's pretty much... they get bundled together in a graphic novel when it's too hard to find the original issues, or they get too expensive.
I know, but in this case, I saw that last night on Instagram, and Mark Millar said Volume 1 is going to be issues 1 to 4.
Okay,
so
but we don't know when that's going to come out either.
Right, we don't know.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I can see Clive Barker's point too, though. Of course, I mean, why why would he give away the story of the Scarlet Gospels in the Hellraiser comics?
And especially because there are different people writing the story in the comics, different people who answer to different editors, and as different people writing this, they have their own ideas. It's not from Clive. It's not from the brain of Clive Barker. So
but
why would that...
I had wondered if there was a hint of what's going to happen in Scarlet Gospels. You know, when Harry D'Amour first was mentioned in the Hellraiser Boom comics.
Sure, yeah. I guess anyone would have thought that because Scarlet Gospels is being edited, and you know, it's a Hellraiser comic with Harry D'Amour. People are going to think, oh, it's going to have tie-ins with Scarlet Gospels, but right, apparently that's not the case.
Yeah. So, that's the end of those Facebook posts. This is kind of just something funny I wanted to kind of throw in here, but on Occupy Midian, you know, as we're waiting for the release of the Nightbreed Director's Cut / Cabal Cut DVD to come out, there's been some sort of funny debates that I just wanted to kind of throw out there. So one of them recently was, should there be a Rawhead Rex Director's Cut?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were just talking about this, like, the director is awful, right?
Yes,
why would you...
George Pavlou, and he did Transmutations, he did Rawhead Rex, and he did another movie called Little Devils, The Birth. Apparently that's the extent of his long feature films, and then he did some short films. But apparently, no, he never really picked up, did he? I mean,
No.
He was always like a mediocre...
And why would you let him come back and add more to Ryan?
I know. One of my replies was, this is a movie that the more you add to it, the worse it gets. So, and even Russell Charrington, who's actually the restoration director for Nightbreed, the Cabal Cut, he said, if there's a movie that needs to be remade, it's this. It's a terrible film. So
I think he said it's an abortion.
It's an abortion, right? Yeah.
So,
well, Transmutations is worse.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, you
worse.
take Rawhead Rex and you multiply the badness of that by 100, and that's Transmutations. You
do recognize the story in the movie of Rawhead Rex.
Yeah.
You do recognize the story. Mm-hmm. It's still pretty much there. It's just the execution that fails miserably. Like,
and the script the script is probably half there, and it follows probably the beats of what Clive Barker wrote.
Right, except for the ending, which is completely out there. It has absolutely nothing to do with what Clive wrote in the story.
And the way Rawhead would kill somebody is push him up against the wall and like motorboat him to death.
Motorboat them. With his like flashing LED eyes.
Yeah.
And it's sad when you go back and you kind of read like early quotations from Clive Barker when the movie was in pre-production, and he had no idea what was coming. And of course, he was trying to pick up as a household name, and he was trying to get his stories adapted. And he was like actually praising them, saying, "Well, actually, they came up with this beautiful, monster, and the neck muscles are so realistic, and they're coming up with all these like fantastic special effects for it." And then you see the movie, and then it's like, "Oh, Clive."
Oh yeah.
I can't help but think that someone showed him a half prototype of the monster, in a garage, and he was like, "Well, we're putting these servo motors in," and Clive was like, "Okay, sounds good."
Yeah. Well, and he had designs for the monster that they totally threw out, and they wanted to make it look more traditional. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Probably it would have been a little closer to the comic book adaptation version. Because he wanted it to look more like a phallus, than what it ended up being was just a goofy monster with boots and shoulder pads. Yeah,
like he says, Rawhead Rex is an 8-foot monster, 8-foot penis on a rampage, afraid of vagina dentata.
Yeah,
that's basically what it is. So, and there was also an adaptation. I'm just putting this as an aside. It doesn't really have to do with the movie. There was also an unfulfilled adaptation that was put in concept stage by, I think it was Bernie Wrightson, comic book artist. I think he wanted to do a a graphic novel adaptation of Rawhead Rex, and he came up with some designs and some, you can find them if you Google them. I think you can still find those things online if you Google that.
But the Tapping the Vein / epic one is awesome.
Oh yeah. No, Les Edwards' artwork is flawless. Yeah. It's just so amazing. The artwork, the painted artwork, is just beautiful. I mean, just that frame in the graphic novel where Rawhead Rex is sitting on a mountain side under the moonlight, eating from the kid who he just murdered. He's eating the kidney, and this is so sweet. Yeah. And that whole painting, I mean, it's just blows me away whenever I see that.
Yeah. So our other Occupy Midian debate right now was somebody brought up the Nightbreed remake, which that alone irritates me. The idea of a remake of Nightbreed bugs me, but he'd suggested that Rob Zombie be the director.
Yeah, I know. There were several people, not just that person in particular, but several people have an idea for remake. Several people were putting up names for recasts. Yeah. Some of them were obvious jokes, of course, but but someone actually, I think, suggested at one point that Boone could be like Tom Cruise.
Yeah, and Paul Giamatti for
and Paul Giamatti would be Baphomet. In my universe, I don't see that as a possibility, but although, don't get me wrong, it's nice to come up with dream casts for, Nightbreed. Hey, if we had like $180 million, to remake Nightbreed, who would you cast as your dream cast? It's a fun thing to do. It's fun. People like to go and say, oh, I would have gotten Lady Gaga to play, Lady Gaga could play like Rachel or something like that. Yeah. Oh, God forgive me. But but you can say that. You can say, oh, Alice Cooper should play Lylesburg, something like that. I know. But ultimately the reality of the thing is that the movie stands on its own. The movie stands on its own, and being an Occupy Midian, it's all about preserving the movie, not remaking it.
Right.
So
remaking it is like spitting on it. I mean, unless it's done really, really well, and that's almost never.
It's needless.
Yeah.
There are movies who have no need to be remade. Like Total Recall. They remade it.
Yeah.
It's a mediocre movie with a lot of special effects.
Yeah.
RoboCop. That one didn't need to be remade. But they did. They remade it, so it's going to come out now.
I mean, RoboCop, you can always... And that's the age we live in. You can go back and watch a movie again. You don't have to, wait for it to show up on TV or, like when we were kids.
Nowadays, gosh, we have DVD... we have DVDs, Blu-rays, we have on-demand cable subscriptions.
Yeah.
We have Hulu, Netflix. You can even pirate it if you want to. I mean... It's just the age of instant gratification. It's the age where you want to see something. You want to see Groucho Marx presenting You Bet Your Life. You just go on Netflix and you can see a TV show from the 50s in like a few seconds. Whereas when we grew up, we were like, you could see it on TV when it was on TV, and then
and if you had to go to the bathroom, you've lost that little portion of the show forever. You're not going to see it again.
Right, and then if your dad had bought like a Laserdisc or a VHS, you could probably buy it for like a bunch of money,
$60, and $90 for a VHS.
Right, and that was it, and it would be the quality of the medium that you would buy. And I remember like watching, frame by frame on the VCR, which was terrible because the frames would be like flickery and stuff. Trying to find the details of the movies. You see, I think I see like how this is made. I think I see how Blade Runner's blaster is. Try to come up with sketches of it and say, oh, this is what it looks like. And of course nowadays people just they can go on a Blu-ray and everything's there like in extreme definition.
Yeah.
But I remaking Nightbreed would be useless.
Yeah. But that being said, as I've, and this is getting into Cabal, but as I've been reading Cabal, I've been thinking, man, I wish they could have put that in the movie. Little things here and there.
Well, my opinion of Cabal is that actually I was surprised because I had read the book the first time back in '93 when I was visiting Canada, which is an interesting story. I was there for a few weeks, and I visited Canada. I visited Vancouver, Edmonton, Montreal, and the Victoria Islands and places like that. So it was fun to read this because this takes place in Canada, and I was reading the book while I was there, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Actually, when I was reading the book, because I'm rereading it again now, it's probably like the third time I'm reading the book, or maybe second and a half would be more accurate.
For me, I think.
And the first time I read it was back in '93. I was in Canada in the summer, and I bought it there, and I read it in Canada, so that was cool. I was like in Edmonton, Vancouver, Montreal, and I was reading the book. And then, the second time around, I think I read the book like very, very quickly. It was just like, oh, it's, just something to do. I was like, that was like ages ago. That was like years ago. And then I didn't pick it up for like maybe 10 years. So I was reading it again now, after almost 10 years of not reading it. And I was surprised with the fidelity, with the fidelity of how some scenes were translated into the film. Amen. Because actually I think the film is pretty faithful, well, at least the Cabal cut. Yeah. The Cabal cut is pretty faithful to the book.
Well, and presumably Clive Barker's original cut that he presented to Morgan Creek and Fox was probably really faithful also. I mean,
a lot of these lines are just lifted verbatim from the book. Yeah. It's just very, very well, a very tight, adapted thing. They just changed a few things, like you said. Like, for example, some big things that come to mind is when Cheryl is killed, she's not killed outside of Midian. She's killed in a burned restaurant. Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so site news. We were cited on as I was going through the news about Scarlet Gospels, I saw that my interview with Mark during Mad Monster Party was quoted on the Revelations website, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. About the Scarlet Gospels and about how he was 80% finished with the editing at that point. So that was kind of neat. Let's see, more site news. Oh, okay, so the bandwidth raffle that we did before, we have a winner. So first of all, I want to name the people who contributed. David Anderson. Thank you so much, David. And he contributes a lot more than than people realize, because he's always commenting and having thoughtful things to say and gives us stuff to talk about. So thank you so much, David. Jose, of course, you did, and I did. Bradley Gartz, and then Pyramid Gallery donated, which was pretty cool.
Thanks, Max.
Yeah, thanks, Max. And Kip Jankowski and Craig Reese.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
all people from Facebook and Occupy Midian and the Clive Barker podcast Facebook page.
And I did a little drawing out of my dome, the glass dome from the Hellraiser cube from the puzzle box, and I shattered it all over my 2-year-old, all over Joey. And you can watch the video of that while we were trying to do the drawing. But anyway, the winner was Bradley Gartz. So congratulations, Bradley. I haven't put your book in the mail yet, but I promise I will do that very soon. I've had some weird stuff going on in my life recently, but I'm going to get to it, I promise. And I was thinking about site news and how, we did the dumb comment of the week several episodes back, and I realized that I don't really want to commit to that. So I don't read all the comments all the time. I mean, unless you have any dumb comments to.
Well, I actually do have one.
Okay.
But I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to single out anybody.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm not going to mention the name of the person.
Okay.
And if they listen to this, hey, it's not personal. I just want to say I thought it's an opinion. It's more like dumb opinion of the week, I guess. I don't want to be unfair. But someone in Occupy Midian said that Rob Zombie is as talented, if not more so, than Clive Barker.
That hurts my heart.
and I read that and I was like, I know how everything is relative and everything depends on personal taste, and everything's subjective, but that hurt my brain to read, because I don't think, in my view, that's not accurate at all.
No.
So. No. For me, that would be my dumb comment of the week.
Unless you're talking about as a musician.
Sure, yeah. That's one way that he's more talented than Clive Barker. That's true, yeah.
But
so there you go.
As a director, I think no. And other people might argue, that's personal taste. As a writer, absolutely not. No way.
Right.
I mean, his dialogue. I mean, his characters are all a lot of. They're like Texas Chainsaw Massacre characters. They're a bunch of murderous hicks.
Yeah, and then I don't want to be mean because I actually enjoy Rob Zombie's music, but he casts people for his movies. It looks like he just goes to these conventions. He finds these B-movie, actors who are going through the convention circuit, and he goes like, "Hey, you want to be in my movie?" Yeah. So that's how he got Sid Haig. That's how he got a bunch of those.
He's fans of old '70s horror movies, and that's what he's trying to emulate.
So I don't know. I guess I did enjoy at least one of his movies, The Devil's Rejects. That's kind of fun. The first movie, but we're not here to talk about Rob Zombie's movies.
I didn't like House of a Thousand Corpses that much.
Yeah,
and
I didn't like it either. I thought it started off well, and then it just lost its way towards the end of the movie, and then it just becomes completely, incomprehensible. So
yeah. Well, and going back to what we were saying about him, Rob Zombie as a writer, his songs are the lyrics are nonsense.
Yeah, the lyrics are. The lyrics are created after the music is created, so I guess it just goes for metric and
Yeah, it's like that song about Dragula. That's the Munsters car, right? And it's like, do you remember that car like digging through ditches and burning through witches? I mean, it's just nonsense.
Yeah, I know. It's hey, a lot of music lyrics are nonsense. I mean, when you start looking at them seriously, I'm sure if you go to a lot of those heavy metal bands, they're also a little weird sometimes.
Well, Black Sabbath was that way, but you can blame the drugs.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was the, and then there was the debate about the Dreamcast for Nightbreed, which we talked about already. So that's it for Site News and for Clive Barker news, unless there's anything else you can think of.
Well, that's pretty much it. Just that I'm really looking forward to getting my Cabal and other annotations. And
well, geez, maybe you could do like an unboxing video. That would be kind of cool for the site.
Sure, I'll do it. Yeah. And I will be attending the Convolution.
Yes.
The Convolution festival or convention at Burlingame, San Francisco. In November 3rd, I think. So I'll be there. I'm going there with my wife. We're going to be going to the screening of the Cabal Cut. And looking forward to meeting, people from Occupy Midian and, people who happen to be there. I'm probably going to be there, meet up with Russell and, the actors. It's going to be fun. It's going to be very fun.
That one is Ann Bobby and Craig Sheffer, right?
I think, that's Ann Bobby and Craig Sheffer. That's pretty cool, actually.
It is really cool.
I always wanted to meet Craig Sheffer. I need to find a copy of a movie so he can sign it for me. I really, really, I would really love to have him sign the Berserker, Hell's Warrior DVD. Where he plays this immortal Viking warrior that suffers a curse and he becomes a berserker.
Oh, so he says, "Go get him, boys," to himself.
Yeah, it's more like, I'm going to drink my enemy's blood and eat their flesh because that's what Odin's curse made him do.
You'll have a ton of Nightbreed stuff to autograph.
Oh, well, Actually, not that much.
Because it's all in Portugal.
In Portugal, yeah. Well, I do have my making of the film book.
Oh, that's good. And do you have your Nightbreed Chronicles?
No.
Oh,
no.
That one's awesome to bring because you can always find somebody new to sign it. So I even got Malcolm Smith to sign mine.
I'll find a way to get that shipped to me from Portugal in time for that. It's just in November, so there's plenty of time for that.
Oh, yeah.
Because my copy of the Nightbreed Chronicles is already autographed by Doug Bradley.
Yeah. So you got to do that.
Yeah, I do.
So that will be cool. That'll be a nice Occupy Midian on location, and of course, the ones that you and I can do are the best because we're in control of what we're recording and stuff.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'll do my best to record the panel and try to get some people to talk and say something for the podcast.
Yeah. So now we're on to Cabal. So obviously the novel that inspired the movie that started filming only 1 year after this was written, right? It was written in 1988. So he was writing Cabal at the same time that Hellraiser 2 was out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some slight changes and some interesting things. You know, like David Cronenberg has become iconic as Decker, and everyone remembers Decker as David Cronenberg, but in Cabal, he's a big muscly guy.
Yeah. In Cabal, Decker is a big hulking figure. Yeah. He's tall and he's bulky. Well, he'd have to be to do the things that he does, right?
He's intimidating in every single way, right? Because he's intellectually he's intimidating, and he can sort of bully Boone into believing whatever he wants him to believe.
Yeah, in fact, that's like immediately in the second page of the story when Decker is talking to Boone, we see that we read a description that says, he was trembling, Boone saw, a fact not easily concealed in a body so big.
Yeah.
Decker had the physique of a man who sweated out the day's angst in a gym.
Yeah.
So, and again, it had to be someone like that. It couldn't be like a scrawny figure. A scrawny guy wouldn't be able to like kill entire families, let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, and I found that really interesting that, and that whole idea that Decker, and this wasn't, for timing and pacing and stuff, this wasn't in the Cabal cut or Nightbreed, but Decker going through the details with Boone over and over and over, and just to make sure that Boone memorized all the details of the murders. It's like, wow, that's brilliant, and you could not get away with that with anybody who was not, who was thinking straight.
Right, because he also does that while he gives Boone some pills.
Yeah.
Which we guess are like kind of hypnotic or something, maybe to make him like not think too hard, not think that. While I was reading this, I was like, well, this is obviously he's trying to, he's trying to, insert these details into his mind so that when he's like interrogated by the police, the police will say, "How did he know that? That means he's the killer."
It'll become a memory instead of just, well, that's something that Decker told me.
Exactly. He was trying to tell Boone that let's go pace by pace so you can remember what you did, and basically he's just feeding him these false memories.
And
that's brilliant.
And if Boone had been lucid or confident, he would realize that Decker shouldn't have that level of detail about these murders.
Exactly, exactly. And it's also interesting that he would say that, in the movie, we do see that they record their sessions. But it sounds like it's just like a chatty kind of therapy going on. Yeah. But here in the book, they mention that Boone would rant about things while he was under deep hypnosis.
Yeah.
He would be put under deep trances by Decker. And that's when he would start talking about, his dreams and Midian.
Yeah. And Decker says that's when he talked about the murders. And now in the movie, he says, "Would you like to hear them?" And Boone says, "No." And it's like, well, no, wait, I want to hear that because there's no way that really happened. And that was a bluff, right? Because there was probably nothing on that tape or nothing like that. But in Cabal, he says, "I destroyed the tapes."
Yeah, it's a little inconsistency or something that should have been like addressed in the movie. At least they should have said, these are the tapes that we did while you were under hypnosis or while you were under, a trance.
That was a gutsy move on Decker's part in the movie to say, "Would you like to hear them?"
Sure. Yeah. It's also something to make the audience think that, oh, that must mean he is guilty. That must mean the tapes do have his confessions.
So you think it's kind of a way to keep the audience...
I think so.
To keep the audience in the dark until you want it to be revealed about Decker.
Yeah, because imagine if you never read the book before you saw the movie, you'd think that Cronenberg is actually a good guy and that there's something going on with Craig Sheffer.
I went out and bought this book right after I'd rented... a friend of mine rented the movie. And I watched it at his house, and I was just blown away, and I went out and bought the book, and that was the beginning of my Clive Barker fandom. That was probably... I mean, because the movie didn't last in the theaters very long, so I'm sure that it was 1990.
Yeah, I got this book in 93, so it was a little later.
I bought the paperback that had this woman screaming, like an outline of this woman screaming with like scare lines coming out of her on the cover. It's a horrible cover.
Yeah, it sounds horrible.
Yeah, I'll see if I can put that in the show notes, just to, but yeah, I mean, since I've replaced it, but
I would just like to call to attention a little something before we start, which is the quote that opens the book is quote by Domingo de Barranco.
Yeah.
And he says, "We are all imaginary animals," or something like that.
And I think that this is gutsy and awesome that Clive Barker put fake quotes throughout the entire book, and nobody knew. I sure didn't know when I was reading this in junior high that these were all fake quotes. You just sort of go along with it, and it's like, oh, that's, oh, yeah, that's so-and-so. Sure, yeah, oh, yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, but it's interesting that I did some research, okay? And Domingo de Barranco is a name used by, Clive Barker as the clown in the book called The Adventures of Dr. Maximilian Bacchus and His Traveling Circus. Yeah. For those who never read the book, that's the name of the clown character.
Yeah.
What happens is that Domingo de Barranco was a real person. Domingo de Barranco is someone that's buried in the Liverpool in the churchyard at St. Austin's, and I actually found a picture of his headstone, Domingo de Barranco.
Really?
Yes, apparently. Domingo de Barranco was a pretty successful guy who in 1899 was given the job of winding up the Liverpool Meter Company Limited and forming a new company to be called by the name of the Street Lighting Company Limited, or some such other name as the liquidators may determine. This is from the London Gazette in 1899. He lived from 1843 to 1909, and his gravestone is in the churchyard of St. Austin's. So I'm just guessing that Clive Barker actually visited this graveyard, and he liked the name so much
that he lifted it.
And put it in his juvenile work, the Adventures of Maximilian Bacchus and Traveling Circus. Yeah. So here you go. Domingo de Barranco was a businessman from Liverpool.
And the very next quote is, "I was born alive, isn't that punishment enough?" By Mary Hendrickson at her trial for patricide.
Right.
So I thought it was, it was funny in an interview that I was reading, and it wasn't that long ago that he said, "Oh yeah, those are all fake quotes in Cabal," and I was kind of like, "Hey."
Yeah. Well, it's a way of like. It's like in Abarat. I mean, in Abarat, you also have like these fake quotes from Klepp's Almanac and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, they're quotes from characters from the, from characters from the past in that world.
Exactly.
And in this case, though, this is done in the way that novels are done. Sometimes where you have a quote from a famous person that kind of sums up what the chapter's about.
Exactly.
Except they're not real people.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
Oh, it's pretty cool, yeah. It was cool because, especially the Domingo de Barranco quote, allowed me to chase the rabbit down the hole, and I found about this, which was pretty. Yeah. It was pretty fun because it was like, oh, this is in Liverpool, and then you can see the gears turning. You can see the gears turning, and it's like, oh, that's where he got it from. Just like Mamoulian from the Damnation game. Mamoulian was a Broadway, theater. He was a theater director in Broadway. And I asked him on Twitter, I asked Clive once on Twitter, so is Mamoulian from Damnation Game? Like, a reference to this guy, to this Mamulian from Broadway from the 20s? It's like, yep.
And let's see. Laurie is not a singer. Laurie works in an office, and that's all we know about it. We don't even know what Laurie's last name is.
I am not entirely certain. I don't think I remember it.
Yeah. Well, and in Nightbreed, it's credited differently than what they say in the movie. So in the movie, they say Winston. In the credits, or at least on IMDb, they say Deschinger.
Yeah, but I think in the credits for Nightbreed, it's Winston.
It's Winston.
Or just
so
Laurie.
just IMDb is screwed up then.
I think. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
What does it say on your script, on your second draft or the script? Do you remember?
No.
It might be just Winston as well.
I can go grab it.
Oh, yeah, we should plug the episode that she's going to work in. We should plug this at the end of the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Disposophobia.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
There's 76. Miss Winston, are you sure you wouldn't rather postpone? And she says, no, let's get it over with.
Yeah, so that's pretty much Winston in the second draft, in the draft that's online, and in the movie. I have no idea where that Thesinger came from.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
So Laurie works in an office. We don't know her last name. We have no idea what Boone does at all. I don't think it's ever mentioned in Cabal.
No, it's never mentioned, and he doesn't sound like the working kind of guy, because here it says things like he could go days without showering. He could go like months without cutting his hair, 6 months without cutting his hair, and months without shaving.
So he sounds somebody that's like a ward of the state almost.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get. In the Cabal cut, of course, he is a welder.
Yeah.
Or works with welding, I guess.
Or I think he was a car mechanic.
I always wondered the way he plays around with the sculpture in Decker's office. I always, for some reason, got the impression that the sculpture might have been something he did.
No.
But I never,
Yeah.
But of course, that's just my imagination.
Yeah. Yeah, or he's kind of and he was kind of fiddling because it's like, I don't understand why I'm here. So Laurie went to Midian for the first time with Cheryl and the second time by herself. So there's another difference between this and the movie, right? Because in the movie, for the sake of brevity, Laurie and Cheryl go to Midian together, and Cheryl gets murdered right there in that first trip.
Instead of them having the scene where Cheryl tells Laurie, "Oh, come and meet Curtis. We're going out for dinner."
Yeah, we're going to a restaurant, and it's one that he picked out, and it turns out it's a burned out restaurant. And this is the funniest thing was her saying, "Yeah, Curtis is kind of one of those kind of guys where you can't really tell if he's making a joke or not."
Yeah,
and it's like you just know. You think about Decker, and he's like, he's never telling a joke.
Honestly, I think that it works better in the movie, how it happens, instead of the book. In the book, I'm like, nobody would actually go inside a burned-down restaurant to look for their boyfriend.
I think they would, yeah. I mean,
you think? Yeah,
because she thinks it's a practical joke. I mean, Laurie doesn't want to go in.
But it's kind of weird for like a second date, someone doing that, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, but she's like nutso over this guy, and she's desperate.
Yeah, that's true.
And she thinks it's some kind of a joke, and it's like, okay, now where are we going for real?
Of course, another huge difference in this is that Kinski, that we love so much from the movie, here he's Jackie.
Yeah.
Not Kinski at all.
And Jackie Jackie becomes Otis and Clay in the movie.
Yeah, and Jackie is a guy with two faces smashed together.
Yep.
So just like Otis and Clay in the movie, which he's never really mentioned in the movie, but you do see him in like two parts. One, when Boone is dreaming and people are running to the gates of Midian, you see this guy running through the high grass.
And which his head is kind of poking out of the grass and looking around while he's running. Yeah.
It's more like a doll on a trolley or something,
or somebody's crouched and running with the head on like a pole or something.
Yeah, because the arms are kind of flailing a little bit, and you can tell it's just a doll. And then there's another one when Kinski and the Inner Circle are getting Baphomet out of the tabernacle. then it's about to blow and everything is crumbling. And then you see Otis and Clay like stumbling in a tunnel, and he's got like his head is hurt and he's like just stumbling around. You see him there as well.
Well, and I thought that was a choice that was made just because they couldn't articulate Otis and Clay enough to make him speak and you know, do intelligent lines and things. So then Kinski character was created and sort of put in the place of Otis and Clay.
Yeah, and of course, Peregrine is also very different from the movie version.
Well, so is Cabal.
And so is Cabal, and so is Narcisse, you know, and so is Narcisse, and, you know. So that artistic process and the translation from book to film, you know, of course, that has a lot of people from Image Animation and Clive Barker coming up with practical effects. So that gave rise to dramatic changes, like Narcisse. In the book, he rips out his entire face. In the movie, he rips out around his face, but not his face.
And Clive didn't want his face to come off because then it would be just like Frank.
Right. He would just have another guy, you know, witty, kind of like a little evil, but with a skinned face. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think it was a good choice, and it also made Narcisse even more charismatic than maybe he would have been.
Yeah.
And people love that character.
It would have been very jarring to have as a friend a guy who has no face.
Yeah. And you could kind of tell that probably that he probably read the novel.
Hugh Ross?
Hugh Ross probably read the novel because the kind of sarcastic, funny attitude that Narcisse has in the novel really carries over well in the movie.
Yeah, even some lines seem to be like ad-libbed, but they're not. Like when he says sailors, you know, you could think that, oh, that's probably like something he came up with on the set. No, it's on the script. Yeah. So it just delivers it so well that it just sounds so natural. Of course, Hugh Ross is an amazing actor, so it's you know, a very talented actor. So that I shouldn't be amazed by that. But
the characters transform in the movie, in the novel, in a way that they go from bipedal human-looking humans to like a lizard or a wolf or and Cabal is sort of part he's sort of part Kinski, part Peliquin and part Lylesburg. And part Baphomet. Then Baphomet puts a lot of, puts some power into him that makes him different in a different way too. But he's got it said he was in between like a clown and a wolf man, sort of, the way his face looked. And then he had a shadow that would sort of
swirl inside his head.
Yeah.
Like kind of a pattern that swirl inside his head.
Yeah, and the shadow moved almost, I got the impression that it kind of moved almost separate from him, and it scared the crap out of Decker.
Well, of course, this was done in a time when practical effects were still king, and CGI was not, it was not even in its infancy. But who knows if Nightbreed was made today, how those effects would have turned out,
Yeah. Well, and you trade that for the story, right? That's the way movies are today, mostly.
It's not mutually exclusive. You can have, if it was a Clive Barker movie done with a decent budget today, I'm sure that the special effects would be used in a way to enhance the story.
But I think the problem is that there's not a lot of trust to the smart people who make really interesting movies. It's the dumb people who make big budget, Transformers, I guess, kind of.
I know.
That's cynical, I guess, and it's not always the case. I loved fun stuff. I loved Pacific Rim.
Yeah,
and
like kaiju movies.
Yeah, and that was not a sequel to anything or an '80s line of toys or a cartoon from the '80s. Mm-hmm. So good for them for letting that for putting that through.
Yeah, it's a little original thing that takes you straight into an existing universe that exists only for that movie, and it creates a consistent reality. So, and that's what I think that Nightbreed did when it came out. It took you into this kind of wonderland, dark wonderland, and dropped you right in the middle of it. And it had so many special effects, practical effects. You know, it was just oversaturated with like creatures and stuff. It was just amazing. That's why it's still resonating a lot with people today.
And there was even one of the creatures was like a robot with caliper legs, like a robot beetle that had caliper legs. It's like, wow, how did that become a Nightbreed? And there's so much there's so much in there that you just want to know more about it. But it's this book is kind of a tease.
Yeah. This book has a lot of good stuff here. It's not as visually, of course, unless it's all in your imagination. So you have to come up with the descriptions. That this book has a lot of narration, a lot of description as well. It's not. It doesn't have that much dialogue, or there's a lot of things here that are narrated and explained and described, and this helps to visualize it in your head. And of course, nowadays it's hard to dissociate the movie from the book. Yeah. So whenever you're reading the book, even if the character is not similar to the one in the movie, you still visualize it as the movie, which is kind of hard.
So who do you think is the main character in the novel?
The main character in the novel?
Yeah.
I think for a lot of the movie, for a lot of the book, it's Laurie.
I think so too. I think Laurie is the main character.
Right.
She's our bridge between being a person and the Nightbreed, right? She's the one that doesn't understand and doesn't have any experience with it and is trying to learn it along with us.
Yeah, and whenever someone explains something, she's there to get the explanation.
And I think that was meant to be in the movie too, and it because of the way it was cut, it became more of Boone's movie.
Right, and then it became Decker's movie for some people.
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah, but that's true. You raise a very good point. That was an excellent question, and I think for a lot of this book, it's Laurie. And when the narrator's talking, I think he's talking through Laurie's eyes. Like for example, there's one page where she's talking to Boone, and he says, "What's to be afraid of?" She said, and he stroked her cheek. She almost expected his hood of skin to come unbuttoned then, and the marbles that played in his sockets to tumble out and smash. It's like we see what's going on inside her head. We know what she's thinking. We know what she's feeling. That's why I think that she's the main character.
But Clive Barker does, and this is in all of his stories and his novels, he does float the narrator, the omniscient narrator, from one character to another. But yes. You always have a pretty good idea of who the main character is. Like you could say that Gentle is the main character for Imagica. Even though there's like 100 characters in that novel, and you get a lot of their point of view throughout the novel.
And I think that the second bigger character here is Decker, because it cuts a lot to Decker talking to the mask, and Decker looking for someone, and Decker trying to fight
the urge to put the mask on and reveal himself.
Yeah, it puts us inside Decker's head a lot as well. And weirdly enough, it doesn't really put us that much inside Boone.
Well, and he's dead for a third of the...
exactly, yeah. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, and things happen so quickly. I mean, for reading a novel, the pace is almost as fast as the movie.
Yeah, it's very cinematic. It's a very cinematic book. Yeah. It does read very quickly. I read the Poseidon Press version. I read the Poseidon Press volume, 1988. Me too. I think this is my first edition. I got it from Amazon for like pennies.
I think mine is a small one, so I think mine is a book club edition. So it may not be first. I have another one, I think that's a first edition, but it's not autographed, so I may just give that one.
And at first I was like, wow, this is big. But then I realized that even though it's like 400 pages long, it's just like 100. It's like 200 pages.
Yeah, 180.
Yeah. 180 pages is Cabal, and then the rest is stories from the Books of Blood. Yeah,
volume 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way the United States did that.
It's kind of weird.
It is weird. I there's nothing wrong with having volume 4, 5, and 6. I guess the idea was that collections of short stories don't do that well, maybe, or they were it was a different publisher than did the first 3 books of Blood, so maybe they felt like they couldn't call them. I don't really know what the story is behind that. David, if you're listening, maybe you can tell us what the publisher's reasoning for that was. I mean, and I know they wanted to pad Cabal because it was only a 180-page novel, and they wouldn't even put the Hellbound Heart into a hardcover because it was just almost a short story. It first was published in a magazine.
Again, another thing that I think shows how well translated this was into a script is that even like the secondary characters like Patine, their names survived into the script.
And Onaka, even though in the novel his only part is to get dragged out of the tomb and burn up in the sun. He didn't have any other lines. He didn't have the dog. And he didn't ever meet Laurie. But his name survived.
Yes,
and his character is pretty much the same. He was wearing a hat in the novel, and that's about the only difference.
Yeah, and it's like I said. Of course, it's no surprise because the script was written by Clive Barker. So if anyone should adapt this book to script, it would have been Clive Barker. Yeah. But it really is amazing to see after watching the Cabal cut, or after hearing about it, reading reviews about it. How much better it became, how closer it became to the book, and how much of a good adaptation it would have been if only they had given it a chance.
Yeah.
Because it's Cabal. The Cabal cut is Cabal. Even the ending is the same, Even the ending is the ending with Eigerman and Ashbury.
Yeah, mostly the same.
Mostly the same, yeah. Even though Ashbury doesn't really survive it intact, his baptism by Baphomet and the explosion of Midian. Of course, in the movie we see him like he's been transformed, he's been changed. His face has been kind of burned, and his head has been like swollen, and he's become more than a man, but less than And in the book, Ashbury comes to a pretty gruesome ending after the blood of Baphomet spilled over him, and I think he's still inside Midian when it explodes. And basically, the flames of Baphomet just lift him up with the explosion, and they burn his dick off. I'm sorry, that's just the way to say it.
Yeah, and
his burn his dick off and his clothes and the lace underneath that he wore for all his adult life.
And he had to get his arms and legs amputated, right?
Yes,
his legs, not his arms.
His legs and one arm. Both legs and one arm are amputated because afterwards he falls down, he crashes back into Midian, and they discover him and they nurse him back to health when Eigerman is like, I want to know what he knows. And they tell him, well, he's not going to make it. And he's like, yeah, he made it. Yeah, so then he says,
he came out of the coma crazy.
And he says, I can sniff him, I can smell their God, And, But anyway, I mean, some people like the ending of the movie. I guess it would have been fun if there would have been a sequel.
Yeah, I personally did. I thought it was too much like Jason or Freddy or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, he's back. I mean, yes, they came up with a decent reason, which is fine, but, still.
I was happy that Ashbury was in the ending of the movie. I just wasn't so happy that it was to resurrect Decker instead of like meeting up with Eigerman.
Yeah.
And of course, in the Cabal cut, now we know that he does meet up with Eigerman.
Well, and did Ashbury even really know that Decker was the Mask character? I mean, he'd met Decker, but I don't think that he knew anything about him as a serial killer or an enemy of the.
He might have known. I mean, he might have known.
Maybe he saw something. I don't. He saw him going after Laurie or something. I don't.
Well, I think he realizes that he's in the car with him, and afterwards, I think he might have realized. But anyway, that's besides the point. What's interesting here is that in the book, for example, Ashbury is a much more interesting character than in the movie. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about it. He's a much more outspoken and a much more interesting character in the book than he is in the movie. In the movie,
in the Cabal cut, he's fleshed out quite a bit more.
I thought Malcolm Smith downplayed the character a lot in the movie. But that was also the script he was given, that he didn't have that many lines. But here we actually see some funny, back and forth between him and Eigerman.
Yeah, and Eigerman took some picture of him in his women's underwear and is like using it to blackmail him all the time.
Yeah. So another cool thing is that, of course, you mentioned that Narcisse. The reason why his makeup was reversed from his actual character in the book was that Clive didn't want him to look like Frank.
Right.
But he was not supposed to be just a skinned person underneath his face. He was supposed to have kind of like a lizard-like scaly face.
Yeah.
Right? And there is one picture out there.
Well, it's not super clear in the novel.
Yeah, but doesn't it say that it had some like scaly...
It says that, it talks a lot about how messed up and like it's like hamburger and,
Oh, okay. All right. I thought I remember something here about him being a little scaly underneath.
Yeah, maybe it did. I mean, in the first scene when he cuts his face off, Boone is trying to see beneath the blood, but he never gets a chance. Or he doesn't get a chance, and then later it's kind of described like, that face couldn't be anybody else but Narcisse.
I like a lot the scene when Laurie is going to Midian by herself.
The
second time.
The second time.
When she finds the crying animal, and of course it's Babette, and she goes and she rescues him, and she gives Babette to her mother, Rachel. And then Lylesburg shows up, and in here he's called Mr. Lylesburg.
Yeah.
And
Lylesburg is a little bit more of a badass, I think.
I think so too. Yeah, right. I mean, I think he's more of a... He's probably... I didn't visualize him in the book as so much as a guy in a robe. I visualized him like a guy like in a beat-up suit or something, like a film noir guy, because he's smoking when Rachel says, he saved Babette, he says, we know. And he drags on his cigarette. And that's when Laurie gets to see his face a little bit with the glow of the cigarette. And that's a really cool scene there.
And he's almost non-corporeal, right? Or he can become shadow.
Yeah, because when Laurie goes down the stairs when she's asking, did you take his body? And she goes into the darkness. And it says here that the darkness, all of a sudden, when she becomes afraid, and she wants to go back up the steps, and it's as if the darkness kind of like takes a hold of her with like a million different little hooks, just holding her, and she kind of like gets scared and murmurs, I promise I won't say anything, what else can I say, and then the darkness kind of relents and releases her, and she just runs up instead
of Peliquin.
Yeah. Cinematically, of course, Peliquin is a much better choice because it would be hard to show the darkness like pulling her. Yeah. This is something that's a literary thing.
And Peliquin got all the cool lines in Nightbreed.
Yeah. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Yeah. Pretty little butterfly. Nice.
Of course, like I said, in the movie, it would be hard to depict how the darkness is holding her. Yeah. In a book, you kind of get that impression because it transmits the impression to you that you can imagine like something pulling on your skin. So, like you said, I think it might have been Mr. Lylesburg, like holding her there, holding her to a promise, saying, "Well, I'm going to let you go, but do you promise you're not going to tell anyone about us?" Because, And
Peliquin turns into he's like a normal man, and he turns into a lizard.
He turns into kind of lizard-like creature, yeah.
He goes down on all fours and is running like an animal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did that make it into the microphone?
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, sorry, I just sneezed. And it's funny because if you go to the comic book adaptation of Nightbreed, the first few issues of Nightbreed...
Before they saw the movie,
Peliquin is actually depicted like a scaly creature.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry again.
Yeah, and the comic book is really interesting because they started the first few episodes based on the script of the book Nightbreed, the script of the movie, and Cabal, and they put those together and made the comic book. And then after the movie came out, they're like, "Whoa, that's not what we thought it was going to be." And so they had to kind of backtrack, and they made Narcisse alive again. And it was like, "Yeah, we'll get around to explaining that later," and they never did.
Yeah, that's true. That happened to that happened to Nightbreed, and that also happened to other things like the Disney comics for Star Wars, like that. They also had different things put in there that weren't in the movie because they made the first issues before actually seeing the movie. So yeah, there were some things there.
That's cool.
Some details. Yeah.
No berserkers. Also, I mean, and the berserkers were kind of a way to turn the tide in the movie, where in the novel, Ashbury kind of turned the tide, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
He got up on sort of his pulpit or his soapbox and told everybody, "Hey, what are you doing? You're just following this crazy person. This isn't what God wants. These are people. They aren't animals."
Yeah.
And people kind of lose heart, and some of them are scared, and a lot of them are like, "I don't know what I'm doing here," and they leave.
I love this back and forth when Ashbury is talking to Igerman, trying to make him see reason.
Yeah.
And he says, "You've got to stop this." He said, "Stop what? This massacre." And Igerman says, "I see no massacre." And then there's a line here that says, "How can it be wrong to make the dead lie down and stay dead?" And Ashbury says, "There's children down there, Igerman." "Oh, yeah, with eyes like headlights and teeth. You see the teeth on those fuckers? That's the devil's children, Ashbury."
Yeah.
That's just priceless. Yeah. I wish I could have seen more interaction between Ashbury and Igerman. And Ashbury was just very, very cowardly and very, I don't know. Yeah. He didn't stand up much to
Igerman,
yeah.
No. And this is a good quote, a good passage, too, on page 91, when Laurie is heading towards the tabernacle. "Only once did Laurie glimpse such an entity, supine on a mattress in the corner of its boudoir. It was naked, corpulent, and sexless, its sagging body a motley of dark, oily skin and larval eruptions that seeped phosphorescence, soaking its simple bed. It seemed every other doorway led on to some fragment as mysterious. Was it simply disgust that made her stomach flip, seeing the stigmatic in full flood, with sharp-toothed adherents sucking noisily on her wounds? Or excitement confronting the legend of the vampire in the flesh? And what was she to make of the man whose body broke into birds when he saw her watching? Or the dog-headed painter who turned from his fresco and beckoned her to join his apprentice in mixing paint? Or
that could have been Canis or Toledo the werewolf. Who knows?
Or the machine beasts running up walls on caliper legs? After a dozen corridors, she no longer knew horror from fascination. Perhaps she'd never known. And so that sort of encapsulates the spirit of the movie Nightbreed, too, I think.
Yeah.
That idea is this horror or is this fantasy? And it's like, is it okay for it to be both?
I have a theory here that I'd like to expound a little bit, if you bear with me. It's like Midian, okay? There's the town of Midian, and there's the cemetery. And at one point, when she goes there for like the second time, and Laurie's walking around the cemetery, and she's looking, and she's seeing all these huge mausoleums and these crazy things with like dogs laying on graves, like stone dogs, and it's just they're described as huge mausoleums.
Yeah.
And it says here that she walks over to the other side of the cemetery, and it takes her like an hour to get the other side. That's how big it was.
Yeah.
And for example, you go and you see how much can a person walk in 1 hour? I mean, if they were just walking. I know that she's like walking, stopping, looking here and there, walking again.
Yeah.
But, a person would walk like a mile every 15 minutes. So they probably can walk like 4 miles in like an hour.
Yeah.
So even if you think that she's walking slowly and stopping to look here and there, even if you say that half an hour she's like stopped and another half an hour she's walking slowly.
Well, that's only if she's going in a straight line.
Sure. it would still mean that like it would be at least 1 mile long cemetery, which is pretty big.
Yeah, I kind of think that she probably was wandering around aimlessly.
Well, it kind of tells that she kind of goes in a kind of a straight line, the main avenue, and then when she comes back, she goes through the scenic routes. She picks a few landmarks, and then she starts walking windingly towards the gate again. But anyway, so why was this cemetery so big, and why was the city so small?
Yeah,
and they never really explain it.
It is, I mean, and it is in there like it's a mystery. But it never it never comes up as like there's any kind of an explanation for it.
In the movie, John Agar says, prospectors from all over the world came there and they died. They were buried up in Midian. Yeah. So still doesn't really explain why the city would be so small and the graveyard would be so big.
Yeah.
And here in the book it says at one point it asks the question, did everybody die at once or something?
Well, and the John Agar scene was a reshoot, right? So that wasn't even in the script.
Right. I'm just saying that because that's something we have to go on.
Right.
But
of course
so
in the
weird.
movie there was no city at all, only the cemetery.
Only the cemetery, yeah. Where's the town of Midian? It's not a town; it's a cemetery.
Yeah,
that's what John Agar says.
Yeah, and I think that I think one of our questions coming up is about that. But my thinking is that. That was a budgetary reason.
Sure, that would mean build more sets,
Yeah, and the town's not really that important, right? I mean, if they're going to spend thousands of dollars building a town just so Boone could get shot in it, it's like why not just make Boone get shot in a grassy field instead?
Or they would have just used some Western, Western pre-built sets in some backlot, I guess. Yeah. They would have to dress it up to look like a ghost town, but. Here comes another thing, which I think works better in the movie, because in the book, Boone is shot. The confrontation with Decker comes in the in the town of Midian, in the abandoned ghost town of Midian.
Right.
Like Boone goes into one of the abandoned houses that's still standing for some reason, and after he's been bitten by Peliquin, after he escaped the cemetery,
and his bite by Peliquin is a lot more violent in the novel than it was in the book. He gets his nipple bitten off.
Yeah, he gets his nipple bitten off, and it's like, "Ugh." So he goes into one of the houses, and he's trying to find something he can bandage himself with, and then like the room gets darker, and he looks back, and there's Decker framed against the door, like a huge guy, just standing there, and there's a much more interesting back and forth where he's like, "Well, they're going to kill you because I did those things, and
and I needed you for a scapegoat."
Yeah, and I need a scapegoat. And, they just told me I could come in here because I convinced them that I could get you to surrender. But then, of course, he pulls out a gun and he tries to shoot him, and he escapes.
He does shoot him.
He does shoot him, right?
Yeah, he shoots him in the back.
Yeah,
and Boone, while Boone's going out the door.
Yeah, and then everybody goes like, he's armed, and then he gets shot in a volley of bullets.
Yeah,
and I thought it worked better in the movie because he's shot right outside the gates of Midian.
Yeah. And
that would be like within sight of the Nightbreed, so to speak, rather than being just in the middle of the ghost town where probably the breed wasn't around.
And the ghost town isn't fleshed out very well, and it's not explained, and maybe that's why that whole concept was just dumped from the movie.
Yeah.
In addition to why do we want to build this when it's not really an important place.
I'm still moving towards my theory, which I'm going to expound a little bit ahead. But all I want to say as well is that, and although it was supposed to be a secret place, it seems like at one point everybody knows where Midian is.
Yeah.
It's like because it doesn't seem like it's that hard to actually find Midian. Because Boone goes there, he hitchhikes. He doesn't actually have a car; he just hitchhikes,
and then he walks.
He walks in the middle of the dark while he's like exhausted and hungry and hurt, and he ends up finding it by mistake. And then when Laurie is trying to find Midian, and she stops at this gas station, and there's this guy who says, "Oh, you know who that guy who got shot up there was? Should have been shot like a dog."
Yeah.
Well, Well, I think that they kind of point her into the direction of Sheerneck, and then when she gets there, it's like, she's given directions to go to Midian anyway with Cheryl, and so there was an unused dirt road or something that led there, and I guess afterwards probably the media would be on it, and they would be like covering so people wouldn't know where it was. But the fact is, it's not that hard to find Midian. No, it's not that hard.
I don't think that it was a secret. I just don't think it's an interesting place for people, so they don't go there.
Probably. But when they do go to Midian, it seems like such a offbeat place, like the huge cemetery, like something got dropped in there, like out of nowhere, and there's really no explanation for that. I always kind of like to imagine, and this might be a little outlandish, I always like to imagine that this was kind of like similar to the Seerkind, like unraveling like a location somewhere. Who knows? I mean, that's what I would like to think in my in my imagination, is that Midian is kind of a wonderland, and where all these different creatures live, and it's their home, and it's this huge cemetery that has no reason being there in the middle of nowhere.
Well, and the cemetery is like a mix of people and animals, pet cemetery, and it doesn't have any kind of order like a normal cemetery would. It's just. And it reminded
me of a lot of the descriptions of like the places in Weaveworld, like Nonsuch and places like that. There were also like mishmash of places that were like taken by the Seerkind and quilted together into a location that then they could unravel wherever they wanted. So I think that in the expanded theory of Clive Barker universe, why couldn't the Nightbreed be part of the Seerkind? I know.
I mean, or something, something related, sure, and then
or something related,
And Baphomet's fire pushed Ashbury up against the wall and burned him, right? I mean, and what does that remind us of in a novel that he'd just written a year before?
The Uriel, the Scourge, the Scourge burning, exactly. So, I would just like to imagine that cemetery was like, it's like a magical place. It's not a real man-built place or something. I don't know. I would just like to imagine that. It's so weird that cemetery is there. It's weird. Just my imaginative theory.
And maybe if Laurie had taken some time to investigate it, maybe there would have been some explanation somewhere that she just never took the time. And there was one weird thing that. I know what it was. So there's the origin of Baphomet. So there's a scene where Ashbury is. This is of course just in the novel where he's thinking about where it's talking about the narrator's talking about Ashbury, and if Ashbury had remembered his lessons, and if he'd heard someone say Baphomet, he would have remembered his studies about Baphomet and the worshippers who were burned as heretics. And it's like, so he's talking about the Baphomet from the that was referred to by the Knights Templar. And
sure,
but in the Nightbreed Chronicles, it says that it's not the same Baphomet.
Right.
But in the novel, it's saying it is the same Baphomet.
Yeah, I guess, in the movie he had an opportunity to like revise it a little bit and maybe create something more interesting. That was not so derivative, I guess.
Yeah,
maybe that was a choice.
I'm sure that's probably right. I mean, kind of in the same way that he's revised his universe to say that hell isn't really the Christian hell. Hell is another. Hell is a place on the other side of the schism.
Right. I really like the design for Baphomet that we see in the movie.
Yeah. And it's way different, and that's probably also a budgetary reason, right? I mean, and they say Baphomet is made of stone in the Cabal cut. In the novel, it's Baphomet is been cut into pieces by his enemies, and then he's been preserved in this fire that sort of churns his body parts around.
Yeah, and the scene for Onaka is also pretty much the same.
Yeah, almost identical.
almost beat by beat. I
There's
mean, it's
just
like
more dialogue amongst the policemen, but other than that, it's the same.
He even goes so far as to show when one of the cops beats Onaka back down to his knees.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's a little more gory because when he hits Onaka with his stick, it breaks Onaka's arm at the elbow.
And it comes off.
And it comes off, yeah. And but it's pretty much the same thing.
But they do show I think, doesn't his arm comes off as he's closer to exploding, doesn't it? Or maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
I don't remember that detail. I think he just like coils his arms to shield his face, and then he just starts shivering.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Of course, another thing that is not present in the movie, but is now restored in the Cabal cut, is the psychic report that Babette creates with Laurie. That's in the book, right?
Yeah, and that's really similar in the Cabal cut and in Cabal. It's
because in the movie she just holds hands with Laurie and shows her the past, but here it's a more interesting relationship because they kind of become bonded together,
and they can see through each other's eyes.
And they can see through each other's eyes, yeah. So that's very useful in a few situations here. Yeah. I really like this book. It's very, like you said, it reads really quickly. Of course, it has the advantage of having a movie made from it. So in our minds, we can pretty much just like pull out the memories of the movie while we're reading, and we immediately get a much more detailed and creative view.
There's a cool passage that I kind of wanted to read, and it's on page 170, and this is the death of Decker. So for anybody out there that thought it was bad to make Decker die in the Cabal cut, let's see, we got at the thought, his hand went from his face to his neck, and he seized Decker's windpipe, which had funded so many lies. He closed his fist, and his claws pierced the meat of Decker's throat. Then he pulled. The machinery came out in a wash of blood. Decker's eyes widened, fixed on his silencer. Boone pulled again and again. The eyes glazed, the body jerked and started to sag. Boone didn't let it drop. He held it as in a dance, and undid the flesh and bone, as he'd undone the mask. Clots of Decker's body striking the walls. There was only the dimmest memory of Decker's crimes against him in his head now. He tore with a breed zeal, taking monstrous satisfaction in a monstrous act. When he'd done his worst, he dropped the wreckage to the earth and finished the dance with his partner underfoot. There'd be no rising from the grave for this body, no hope of earthly resurrection. Even in the full flood of his attack, Boone had withheld the bite that would have passed life after death into Decker's system. So it's It's like in the novel he's saying there is absolutely no way he's ever going to come back. I tore him into little tiny pieces and I didn't bite him. and then the studio is saying, yeah, bring Decker back.
Yeah, and it's just like he got stabbed by his own knife, and then he throws him down, and that's it.
Yeah, like 50 feet.
Yeah. There's another really funny quote about Decker and Narcisse that's in here. And, of course, again, Narcisse is such a sympathetic character. He's so fun. And Laurie's being chased by Decker. And Narcisse says, Laurie, this way. And then says, she chanced a desperate look. And there, God love him, was Narcisse beckoning. She veered off the pathway, or what was left of it, toward him, ducking between two mausoleums as their stained glass blue, and the stream of shadow pricked with eyes left its hiding place for the stars. Mm-hmm. Then I'm going to move forward a little bit and says, apparently, the mask closed the gap between them and snatched at her blouse. She threw herself forward to avoid the stab she knew must follow, the fabric tearing as she fell. This time he had her. Even as she reached for the wall to haul herself to her feet, she felt his gloved hand at her nape. And that's like, fuckhead, someone shouted. Yeah. She looked up to see Narcisse at the other end of the passage between the mausoleums, and he'd clearly caught Decker's attention. And, of course, then something really bad happens to Narcisse. Yeah. And I'm not going to spoil it here.
Yeah, but, poor Narcisse, man.
But I love this part where he just shouts, fuckhead, too, like Decker. Yeah. That is so fun.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of the unified, going back to what we were saying about the unified Barker theory.
Yeah.
They're on page 173 at the very top. He says, This is Baphomet talking. "I must be hidden tonight," Baphomet said. "We all have enemies, but mine have lived longer and learned more cruelty than most." So, what if he's talking about the Cenobites?
Yeah, that could have been. Yeah, I could see that working.
They're ancient, right? And they are cruel, and they like to torture people.
That's true.
And who divided up Baphomet and put him like that?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Wow, that's a good one. And it also raises another interesting question. Baphomet has enemies who have lived longer than him.
Yeah.
So it means that Baphomet is not so much a god, but a powerful creature.
Yeah. Well, and what? I mean, it depends on what you define as a god. I mean, a god is anything that's more powerful than us.
Sure, yeah. I once started a story which I was going to send to Midian Unmade, but then turned out that, you can't do anything before Cabal. You have to do it after Midian falls. So I scrapped that. But I had this idea for a backstory for Baphomet. Mm-hmm. And I was going to explain exactly the nature of his, divinity and, how he would be like. I don't want to give too much because I'm probably going to go back to this project one day and then finish it. But you'd have like the prime creator, right? Like the prime god. And then he would have his children. And then each of them would be given like a tithe of his power. Mm. And the more it went down, the less power they would have and the less perfect they would be. So that was something I was working on, and then, of course, I scrapped it. But I see, like, Baphomet as a really perfect creature, a really powerful creature, but not a god, not a creator, per se, right. I guess. And here he's always referenced as the baptizer, right?
And the architect. Because he made Midian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is pretty impressive if something that, somebody that's cut up into little pieces can create a huge underworld like that. Yeah,
and then at the end, of course, we're gonna have to bring this up because there's no way to go around it.
Yeah.
In the movie, we see Baphomet, played by John Henry, I think, picks up Boone by his shoulders and says, "You destroyed our refuge. Mm-hmm. You have to rebuild what you've destroyed. You are no longer Boone. You're a Cabal." And then he's like, "Save me from my enemies." And then he drops him. And it's like, oh, it's time to leave. It's going to blow. And they take him down and they get him out of the chamber and everything explodes. Here, the baptism scene where Cabal is, where Boone is turned into Cabal is a little different. Mm-hmm. And it has some pretty wild things going on here.
Yeah. I know what you mean. But a big part of it, too, is Baphomet's fire goes inside of Boone's body and sort of burns him from the inside, and it changes him and cleanses him and creates a whole different kind of Nightbreed. He's kind of like Blade, right? He can walk in the daylight.
Yeah.
His purpose is to find a home for the Nightbreed amongst the humans. So he needs to be able to be amongst the people.
Sure, yeah, he's like a messiah for the breed.
Yeah,
and of course, in the movie, it's not immediately clear what his function is going to be like, and why is he leaving the breed in a barn in the middle of the dark and is taking off with his girlfriend. That's not immediately apparent why he's doing that.
I always just thought he was because he was trying to go find a place. Because they're all stuck in a barn, so
right.
That can't last.
At least here it's more clear what he wants to do because he actually is saying to Laurie at the end of the book, he's like, we can't be together forever because, I'll have to come back for you later. I have a job now. I have a mission.
And she's like, what, in 100 years?
Yeah. And she's like, no, I want to be with you now. And, you can give me the bite and I'll live forever and we'll be together. And it's like, I don't really want to do that.
He says, I can't do that. She goes, no, you won't do that.
Right. And then she eventually ends up doing something. I'm not going to spoil it. And she does something, and then of course something happens, and there's a more epic ending in there.
And that's all the same as the Cabal cut.
Yeah, and that's all the same in the Cabal cut. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, almost word for word.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, but in the end of the book, Narcisse isn't here. And that take whatever conclusions you want to take from what happens in the book. Right. But yeah, Narcisse doesn't make it to the end. Yeah. In the beginning, I mean, Boone is a very, very tormented character. He's not a hero at all. He's more like someone. He's completely lost.
He can't even function as a human being.
Right, and it's like they don't really have a very healthy or functioning relationship. Him and Laurie.
No, I mean, even like sexually, they couldn't make it work. And she described in other times where he would, you know that scene where he's sort of, when he sees the blood in the hotel and he sort of curls himself up into a ball. Yeah. That she's in the novel, he does that, and she's like, yeah, Laurie recognized that right away. That's what Boone does when when he can't handle a situation, and right. Which is cool because that sheds some light onto the movie where you thought, oh well, he's just overwhelmed by this need for blood. But it's more than that. It's also Boone. It's Aaron Boone's personality, not just a Nightbreed problem.
Yeah, good point. And here it said like they had made love for like 3 times in their whole relationship, and it was always like very awkward and
like a disaster.
So it's like Boone is completely he's like you said, he doesn't even function properly as a human being. And then of course he's transformed through his transformation across the story. He's given a mission. He's given a family, a purpose, and a place to live. And then, of course, everything goes to waste. But then he is now transformed into a messiah of sorts for the Nightbreed, which is pretty cool.
I also really appreciated that in the novel, Narcisse acknowledges the fact that it was also his fault that Decker got away, and he wants to help. He wants to help Boone to make things right. I thought that was pretty cool, and I wish that had been in the movie.
Yeah, another thing that it's come up before, like, okay, so was Decker really a psychiatrist? I mean, in the movie, he's supposed to be a psychiatrist.
I think it's my fault. Because I read this when I was in junior high school, and then I read it again in high school.
That's what I was going to say.
There's a conversation with the mask that I misunderstood.
Where he says, Decker was some old flame that the mask would meet up with every once in a while.
And I misunderstood that to think it was a gay relationship that this character of Decker had and then murdered and taken his personality.
Yeah, but no, it's a more symbolic and deeper thing. It's like
that's
occasionally
totally my fault. Yeah, I just being young when I read that, I didn't understand.
Right. It's more like he's referring to Decker as separate because the mask is separate from Decker. It's like a split personality.
And I'm glad for reading this again now because I've gone like 20-some years believing that Decker went from town to town, killing somebody and taking over their life.
Right. No, I think here he's also a psychiatrist. I think.
Yeah, I think he really is.
Yeah. So that's one of the things.
So I screwed up.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
But it's very, very interesting. I mean, the scenes in the jail when they break Boone out of jail, when there was a little more hoochie coochie.
Yeah.
No time for hoochie coochie.
Yeah.
Here
and
there is time for hoochie
Ross
coochie.
made the line hoochie coochie because that's not what it says in the movie, in the novel, or the script.
Oh yeah, right.
But maybe he was a little uncomfortable with the line.
But it's such a good line, though. Yeah. Such a good line.
And one more. There's a passage here that sort of hints at a sequel. More than hints at a sequel. It's their prayers were full of him. On the next wind, let him come. If not now, then tomorrow. They might not have prayed so passionately had they known what a sea change his coming would bring. They might not have prayed at all had they known they prayed to themselves. But these were revelations for a later day. For now, they had simpler concerns. Okay, so I mean, the idea is like, well, it's not going to be so simple. You know, when Boone finds them a home, it won't be like they think it is. And you know, I think there's really no purpose in that ending except to open it up for a sequel.
Yeah, I love that ending. It's so great, especially the line where they said, "Keeping the children from the roofs at night."
Yeah,
that is so cool. Imagining like a little werewolf, like
yeah,
or like Babette or something. That is so cool. But yeah, definitely, Clive has said that his plan was that he had like folders where he outlined some like ideas for like Cabal 2 and 3, right?
Yeah, and it was about, I think number 2 was supposed to be, I mean, he just had a treatment, I guess, but it was supposed to be roughly about the Nightbreed integrating into society.
Yeah, becoming kind of like superheroes or something.
Yeah, and it would be like the X-Men. I think the idea of, you know, the X-Men is sort of also sort of a parable in a way for homosexuals, right? I mean, because it's like those parents, like in the movie, those parents saying, you know, have you tried not being a mutant? You know, and I think, you know, I think that metaphor could carry over into, you know, the problems of today, and you know, back then you had to hide underground, and now, you know, and now it's a problem of, well, okay, we acknowledge that you're here, but you know, you can't get married or, you know, do stuff that we can do.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a problem of integrating with society, and I think that's probably where it would have gone.
Yeah, that they did that to some extent in the comic books that they created after this. There was some of that. Well, these are creatures that are just roaming around, and you know, eventually, sometimes they meet with humans, and bad things happen. And
yeah.
So yeah, you know, I mean,
yeah. In the ending of this book, it's like, oh, they would take meat every once in a while, as long, you know, to stave off starvation, as long as it was somebody that nobody would miss.
Yeah, but I really like this book. It was a very good experience to reread it again after almost 10 years away from it, because for, you know, since 1990 something, for me, Cabal was Nightbreed, the movie.
Yeah, and this is a really good entry level book, I think, for somebody that wants to find out what Clive Barker's about, or what, you know, or because it's a quick read. It's only 180 pages. But it's still a novel, and there's a movie version of it. So you can say, okay, well, here's the movie, you know, but the movie had some problems with the studio, but you can kind of see, you can see where he was going with it.
Absolutely, and really enjoyed it. Like I said, and it was just begging to be made into a movie. Once you read it, you think, yeah, this is a movie right here. So, you know, Nightbreed, the Cabal Cut, is coming in 2014, and it'll definitely make more justice to the book.
Yeah.
Than what we got.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And
another thing is that here they had some people in Midian who predicted the future as well.
Yeah.
And they call it the prophetic. Because there's one part where Laurie is getting a message from Babette in her mind. And
it's that horrible creature that is lying on the mattress, and they lifted it up over their heads, and somehow it gave them a vision.
Yeah, and then it says, Babette says, they'll find us and try to kill us all. And Laurie says, will they, Babette? And she replies, the prophetic can't see because it's one of those who'll die.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah.
But it's very, very, very nice, this the way they translate some of these scenes pretty much, you know, word for word.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Nightbreed is such an ambitious movie. You know, a lot more than it gets credit for.
Yeah. In the movie, like you said, like Baphomet is this kind of a statue, but here in the book we have a feeling that it's more like it's something that's like floating in, like in pieces in this roiling flame, and it actually like moves and then looks, and you know, like it looks straight at Laurie.
Yeah,
I think they try to do that in that cut scene when they edit that scene when she's hugging Boone and he says, "Don't look," and they cut to her eyes and they cut to Baphomet's eyes, and it's like even though it's just a statue, it's like they're establishing like a line of sight between the two of them.
And in the Cabal cut, Narcisse says, they say, Rachel says, "Why do we need to get him back?" And Narcisse says, he saw Baphomet and he lived. No one's ever done that before. Maybe Baphomet told him something that could help us.
Right.
Yeah, which is kind of why I think that's why Narcisse wants to break him out of jail in Cabal. But Rachel's not with him. It's just him and Laurie and breaking him out of jail.
And he not only sees Baphomet in the tabernacle, he actually is having a conversation with him when Laurie shows up.
Yeah, and then he forgets his whole conversation.
Yeah, at least that's what he says.
Yeah, but then when he sees Baphomet again, he remembers it all. And it's like, oh yeah, they're going to destroy Midian. It's like, well, that would have been a good thing to not forget.
Yeah, you think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So even... Go ahead.
I was just going to go on to our comments, but...
Okay.
On Facebook, Bradley Gartz, who was our winner, he says, "What a great idea, Ryan. Count me in." So this was when we first announced the contest for the book. He says, "You guys put together a great podcast and deserve our support. So thank you, Bradley Gartz." And he was the winner. Craig Reese said, "Thanks again for all your hard work bringing us the podcast, Ryan and Jose. It's great that we can help to support you in this relatively small way. Hope you've managed to get at least a majority of what was needed anyway." It ended up being about half, which was pretty good. He said, "Thanks again, guys, and keep your fingers crossed for me."
Thank you so much, Bradley.
Yeah, and Craig Reese. And Craig said, "Many congratulations to the winner. The video brought a huge smile to our face. Nonetheless, fantastic stuff. Look forward to many more." Yeah, so Joey, it was kind of funny after I broke the glass and I cleaned it up and cut back to Joey again, and I said, "Can you clap? Say yay!" And he goes, "No." and now there's a little lament configuration box which is homeless, which is all very sad. Yeah, it's just sitting on the pedestal with no dome.
Yeah.
Yep. And Mark Buckle said, "Adorably destructive," talking about Joey. And Brian Craddock said, "A little berserker." So to be fair to Joey, it was mostly my fault that dome thing broke, because I was holding it by the side and sort of and shaking it to make the papers shake around, and then that broke it.
It's thin glass.
Yeah.
I always wanted to have one of those things because I have like 3 musical boxes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was scared. I was scared that I wouldn't be able to pack it in my suitcase when I brought it back, but it made it all the way back here, and then I broke it doing something dumb. Yeah. Yeah.
So you packed it in. Well, this doesn't really matter. But did you bring it in your cabin luggage or hall luggage?
I think in the checked suitcase.
Oh wow!
But it was
That's amazing that it didn't break.
It was in a box too.
Ah, okay.
So that helped.
Yeah, a little berserker.
Yeah, Brian Craddock said a little berserker, and then Craig Reese said, "Cool, looking forward to this one too. This is about about Cabal. Can you talk about the berserkers a bit? Maybe who they were or used to be, and where they came from, and any known history of them. They're probably my favorite members of the Tribes of the Moon, with Narcisse a close second." Okay, so they're not in Cabal, but their origin is explained in the Nightbreed Chronicles, that they were an experiment in World War I.
Yeah,
make, super soldiers.
They go back to the time of Catherine II of Russia, I think.
Yeah.
Catherine the Great. Well, you have the Nightbreed Chronicles there with you, right?
Yeah, I can grab it. Just a second.
Because I don't have it with me, actually. But I remember there is something. There is something in there about Catherine the Great of Russia, and how they were like summoned or something, or created. I forgot.
Okay, I'm back. Let's see. Mm-hmm. Towards the end of the Great War, With both sides exhausted, a force appeared on the battlefields of Europe. This was witnessed by many, but reported by few. The Wilding, or Berserker, was developed by German occult scientists as a warrior class designed to exterminate the enemy. But they comprehended little and cared less for the niceties of battle lines. Within a month of their release, during which time their brutal nightly assaults achieved status of legend, the German High Command ordered their dispatch. And as they were massacring at least as many German battalions as British, several berserkers were indeed killed, but a handful, under the hypnotic influence of a bastard son of Queen Catherine of all the Russias, found their way to Midian, where they are kept in the deepest regions of the underworld, their appetite for massacre stoked by deprivation.
Yeah, and they have names, too. There's Ghost, Slaughter, and there was another one. I forgot. Yeah. And another little bit of trivia is that the white berserker,
Ghost,
Ghost was played by Nicholas Vince.
Yeah. And
so there you go.
Ghost the one that Nicholas Vince writes about in the comic book, where there's a battle between Peliquin and a berserker?
Oh, I forgot that.
It might have been Ghost, because Ghost had killed his girlfriend or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember that particular comic.
Sometime we'll have to go through the comics.
Yes, we will.
We've actually cut through quite a bit of the Clive Barker collection, but there's still a lot more to go.
Oh, yeah, gosh. We have so many books that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
And our friend Andrew Kopp is doing a great job doing reviews for our blogs.
Yeah.
For our blog of the podcast. So go there and check it out. Check his retro reviews from Andrew Kopp.
And let's see. Okay, so... Yeah, so that was the Berserkers. They actually play another key role in the comics of the Nightbreed versus Hellraiser.
Jihad?
Yeah, Jihad. There was something about, there was a guy that was their keeper, and he kills himself to create the homunculus to do something. I forget what it all is.
Oh, Nostradamus or whatever his name was.
Yeah.
It's the guy who looks like an alchemist.
Yeah, he's the alchemist, and he's he's important because the Philosopher's Stone of Alchemy is what he's calling the Lament configuration.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's all kind of a complicated story. But the Berserkers, they're in the story, but I can't remember how.
Yeah, I need to reread that stuff again. It's been a while since I've read Jihad, actually. So. Yeah. I just remember broad strokes of it. I remember like the Cenobites fighting the Nightbreed, and then Boone goes into this place and becomes mixed with Baphomet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll get to the comics.
Peliquin gets a girl pregnant, and her
offspring.
Her offspring becomes the new configuration to let. Because it's constantly evolving and changing as it's growing into a fetus.
That is really cool.
And all of that evolving, every time it makes a change, it's like solving a puzzle, so the door is constantly open.
There's another interesting thing, which I was talking to our friend Steve Dillon from Perth.
Yeah.
And actually Perth in Australia.
Yeah.
So, and he's been making some artwork, and he's been making like a sculpture or something for some Nightbreed, and he was coming up with a sculpture for Peliquin, and I remarked that it seemed to me more like a sculpture of Baphomet, and he brought up the idea that Baphomet and Peliquin are pretty much similar. I wonder if there's any connection between them. And I was like, yeah, actually, I thought about that once. And I think a lot of people out there might have figured out that they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
They have like tentacles in their heads at least, and they can give immortal life.
And I always wondered, because it's like, why does Peliquin downplay Boone actually saw Baphomet and survived, right? And everybody else is like, oh, I can't believe no one's ever done that before. And Peliquin's like, guess you can't take the heat.
Yeah. Well, that's just his nature, right? I mean, it's like he doesn't believe in Boone. He's not a believer at all. I mean, even
he just wanted to eat him.
Yeah, I just wanted to eat him. It was like, there goes my tasty snack.
Yeah.
So, I think it's just him like being derisive.
That could
dismissive.
be. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, who knows? It does say in the Nightbreed Chronicles that Peliquin is the one where the heart of the Nightbreed beats the hardest, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. So that he embodies like the nature of the Nightbreed.
At least, from what we can see in the movie, and he's so interesting of a character. Yeah. Paul Alexander says, in the book Cabal, Midian was an actual ghost town with a graveyard at the end of it. Do you think this would have changed the movie in some way if the town were actually featured in it? Or is the movie fine as it is, with Midian being the graveyard sanctuary? We talked about this, and I think that the ghost town is not that interesting, and that it's just as good being a grassy field. Yeah, it just brings that idea that where did the cemetery come from? Yeah. If that's just a cemetery in the middle of nowhere, why is it there? It's just as unexplainable with a little tiny town attached to it as it is like out in the middle of nowhere. That's why I like to come up with my little imagination, and I try to find out, like, hey, maybe that's something that showed up there by magic or was created by magic. Baphomet created Midian, I mean, how did he create Midian? It's never mentioned. Did he just go up to this empty graveyard and start digging? Yeah. Or did he magically create something that would appear to be a cemetery to keep other people away? Because people usually don't like cemeteries, you know. And again, this is just me speculating, Yeah. It's a fun thing to just try to come up with your own explanations for this. Yeah, and I don't, I would imagine that, and without asking Clive Barker, we won't ever really know for sure, but I would imagine that the ghost town wasn't important enough to build it. I mean, important enough to the story. Sure. Like I said, I think it's better that Boone gets shot right in front of the gates of Midian than if it's shot in the middle of a ghost town outside some crane shot of Boone's body in the grass, and going up and spinning around. That's really cool. Yeah, and especially because they slapped it into the mural of prophecy. Yeah. Yeah, and it wouldn't have been, I don't know, I don't think it would have been the same. And it also, Decker shooting Boone in the back, I mean, why wouldn't the police have seen that? Right. So at least, in Nightbreed, they made a conscious choice that Decker doesn't carry a gun around and point it at people and shoot. Right, he's like, I wouldn't know what to do with it. Yeah. But in Cabal, he had no problem using guns. Oh, in Cabal, they say at one point when he's trying to kill Laurie for the first time, the narrator kind of depicts a little bit the modus operandi of Decker, and apparently he would just hunt them down, disable them, shoot them in the back of the head, and then just crisscross their faces until their faces were no longer recognizable. And I always thought that's so weird to imagine Decker using a gun. Yeah. Or the Mask using a gun, Right. I mean, it's so much more cool to imagine him with lots of knives. But it makes sense. I mean, he doesn't want to get somebody overpowering him, or somebody who does have a gun might shoot him. But a gun is not a silent thing, and if you're killing a whole family, you don't want to go in there and bang, 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 bang. Neighbors will hear, So I always thought it was unless they're out, at the end of the road somewhere. Sure, but I always thought it would be so much more cool to have a guy with knives that he just does his work in silence, he's deaf, not someone who actually pulls out a gun and shoots someone in the back of the head. There's no fun in that. Yeah, right. And let's see. Roger says, is there any info on what Clive had in mind originally for a Cabal continuation? We kind of talked about that. Yeah, and we did. Rudy Campos Jr. said, I think the graveyard fits because there were the dead men. That's where the dead men go, and Boone is dead. That's a good point. Yeah. I can't argue with that. Yeah. I mean, it's not but the ghost town isn't in place of the graveyard. It's just kind of like that's, a flimsy excuse to have a graveyard. Really, that's what that ghost town is for.
Well, there's this dream sequence with Laurie after she falls asleep in one, I think it's a Sweetgrass Inn.
Yeah.
When she checks in with Cheryl, and she's been to Midian the first time, and she's haunted by the image of Midian, and she masturbates and falls asleep, and she dreams that she's in the ghost town of Midian, and that the air has a kind of a texture, and it's like a smoky thing, and it starts entering and surrounding her body, and it starts going in through her nose, her mouth, and into her clothes, and it's the dead, the souls of the dead there. Yeah. So it just, of course, this is a dream, and this doesn't really happen in real life inside the book, but it's more like kind of a way to say that it was a ghost town and there were a lot of people there. Maybe that's why the cemetery was so big. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. And then we got a couple of Twitter direct messages from Plump Mantra. Said Hellraiser hits Darlington at the Forum Music. So there was a let's see, I'll pull that up here really quick.
Oh, that's good.
They're doing a screening of Hellraiser and Hellbound on Monday, November 18th at 5 p.m. in the Darlington Film Club at the Forum. So that's pretty cool.
And tonight, I think, Russell Charrington is in Texas.
Yeah, that's right.
For a screening of the Cabal Cut.
At Fantastic Fest.
Yeah, that's also pretty cool.
Which it has the craziest poster.
Yeah.
There's like a barbarian, like a Conan the Barbarian looking guy with a space helmet on, but he's naked.
Yeah.
And there's a mermaid underneath of him, and he's like attacking a dinosaur.
It's like a purple dinosaur. He's killing what's the name of that purple Barney.
Yeah. And there's a planet that you can see in the distance that's an eyeball.
It's awesome. Yeah. It's an awesome poster. I wish I could get a copy of it. I love it.
It is cool. So I guess that's it. We've kind of hit the end.
Yeah.
So that was Cabal.
Well, Cabal, very cool book. If you like Nightbreed, get Cabal. It's much better than the theatrical edition of Nightbreed. Definitely a good companion. Good companion book for this would be the Nightbreed Chronicles, which will give you a little more backstory into some of the characters that you read about in Cabal.
Yeah.
It's not an easy book to find. It's very expensive when you find it. So if you find a cheap copy, I just go for it, because I've seen copies of the Nightbreed Chronicles go for like $70, $80. And once I saw a person asking $100 and something for the book. Good luck with that. I don't think it got any bids,
I think that we can take a little bit of credit for that because of Occupy Midian.
Yes, definitely. There is a renewed interest in all things Nightbreed. So
if you're trying to buy that book, you can blame us.
Yeah.
If you want, if it's really expensive.
You can still get that making of the movie book from Fontana, Nightbreed, the making of the book.
I want to get that, but it's a British book, so it's not as easy to find in the United States. Like if you look on regular, American eBay and American Amazon, it's harder to find.
Right. Oh, if you go on UK Amazon, you can still buy it. It's just going to pay a little more for shipping. But like I said, I found copies that were really cheap.
Yeah.
So that's still pretty good to find. And remember that 2014 is going to be the release of the Cabal Cut, or should I say the director's cut of Clive Barker's Nightbreed. Yeah. Because that's going to be the title of it. It's going to be Clive Barker's Nightbreed director's cut.
We don't know what to do with ourselves.
Exactly. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Yeah. There's like a cover being painted by Clive Barker for the the Blu-ray. Yeah. It's been revealed to us that Clive Barker is working on a cover for the Blu-ray edition. It's going to be put out by Shout Scream Factory. Yeah. And
they're working on international distribution.
They're working on international distribution for people out there who say, well, they only do Region 1. What about me? I live in England or Holland or Italy or Portugal, Mm-hmm. It's a shame that there hasn't been a proper Region 2 release. I wish that Blu-rays would be region free forever. You know, I think that region locking sucks.
Well, yeah, and it's an artifact of a time, you know, that it shouldn't really apply anymore.
Yeah, in the old days, it used to be VHS PAL versus VHS NTSC.
Yeah.
Which kind of worked for a while until, of course, you know, multi-region VHS, you know, players came out really early on, so that wasn't so much of an issue afterwards. But then of course, DVDs
had to come along and wreck it. Yeah.
And then of course Blu-rays also. Blu-rays in the beginning, most Blu-rays didn't have a region, but of course now, especially ones from the US, they're all region locked. So
yeah, which kind of stinks.
Yeah, it does. Because nowadays, I mean, a movie, sometimes you have movies premiering all over the world in the same day.
Yeah.
And they're going to come out in Blu-ray pretty much at the same time all over the world.
Yeah. Why do they need to, you know, especially in English-speaking countries, why do they need to have different packaging? And
yeah, I just don't know. I mean, you could just put in like 20 subtitles in there and just make a single disc for the whole world.
Yeah.
It doesn't, there are no big constraints in Blu-rays nowadays in terms of space that you can't put like 20 different subtitles in there and 20 different
subtitles take up hardly any space at all.
Yeah, and even the menus, you can have menus in multiple languages too.
Yeah.
There's no justification for like region locking. It's just so people they can control different countries getting the movie at different times.
Well, and I think that Hollywood has too much influence, right? I mean, there's a lot of really good movies out there that are foreign that people don't ever find out about because it's all about American movies. That's true. And really, I mean, Nightbreed is kind of a British movie. I mean, it's Morgan Creek is an American company, but it was filmed in England.
Yeah, most of the cast is English, with some exceptions, and most of the crew was English.
Yeah.
So there you go. Mm-hmm. And those who weren't English, they were Canadians.
and back then, Clive Barker wasn't living in the U.S. yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, buy this book. You can find Cabal and other annotations from Fiddleback. Is it Fiddleback?
Yeah, Fiddleback annotated Cabal book is already available to buy.
Yes.
https://Fiddleblack. Wait.
I'm sorry,
It's Fiddleback, yeah.
Okay.
I thought
bad.
it was Fiddleback too, but the link says Fiddleback.
Okay, my bad.
So
Fiddleback.
that's like a black violin, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So get that edition before it runs out.
And it's got the annotations. It's got the high priest of the Church of Satan talking about satanic imagery in Cabal.
My major selling point there is it's Phil and Sarah Stokes' contribution, and it's I can't wait for it. And of course, Mark Miller. I think he also has a word or two to say, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah, and Nicholas Vince.
And Nicholas Vince, of course, yeah. So
he knows a lot about Nightbreed. He did the Nightbreed comic.
Oh yeah, he wrote a lot of it.
And of course, being Kinski, he was there.
Yeah, I would say that probably from Clive Barker's friends, maybe Nicholas Vince is the one who has had the most creative input in Clive Barker inspired works, apart from Peter Atkins.
That's it. I'm buying this thing.
Good one. I hope you can get a copy of it before it runs out.
Yeah, and before Jennifer finds out.
And if you guys don't want to spend $40, which some people might not want to do that, you can find it on Amazon and other places. You can find hardcover first edition of Cabal for like 50 cents. So there's no excuse. Yeah. Just go out there and get the book, read it. If you love it, keep it with you. If you don't like it, donate it to your library so other people can read it. And that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah. Sorry.
Are you actually buying the book?
Yes.
There you go.
Don't tell Jennifer.
Breaking news.
She doesn't listen to the podcast, so I
okay.
As long as she's not here when it arrives.
Oh man, we should put this in the podcast. We'd be like, breaking news.
Yeah, sure, I'll leave it. 99709. Wait,
Did you just say your credit card number?
No, my zip code.
Oh, okay. All right, Ryan. That's wonderful. It's a good book. I'm sure I'm going to be getting it probably this week, and I will do the unboxing video.
All right.
Woo!
I hope that there's some left. I can't believe that when he said there were only 300, it's like I probably shouldn't be putting this off. So I'm going to get it right now.
Okay. Well, it's one of my favorite Clive Barker books. It's probably the first Clive Barker book that I've bought and read back in '93. I think I bought The Great and Secret Show after, or maybe it was before. Now I'm a little confused, but I think this was the first one. So very, very nice.
This was definitely the first book that I bought. And then the Books of Blood. Yeah.
Domingo de Barranco was a real person, so that's the big discovery here. From cyber sleuthing. All right, we'll occupy Midian.
Yep, all right. We'll see you later. Have a good night.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, well, a couple of quick notes here before we go. One thing we had forgotten to mention, Ann Bobby's doing Disposophobia, and she's got an Indiegogo campaign for this short film called Disposophobia that I believe she's writing. So go check that out and donate. Let's see, Pandoric Maker's Magnum Opus has come in from the printers. So if you ordered, it used to be called the Toy Maker's Magnum Opus. If you've ordered that, he's gotten them in from the printers, so it stands to reason that they'll probably be shipped out soon. So you can look for that too. So you can reach us on the web at www.clivebarkercast.com. We're on iTunes and a whole bunch of other places where you can find podcasts. On Facebook, join the Occupy Midian group. On Twitter, we're at BarkerCast and at Occupy Midian. The forum is clivebarkerfans.com/forum. Theme was by Colin Lakativa. And actually, there's one quick thing. I've been sort of trying to track down the apps and places that our podcast is, because I submitted it to a whole bunch of places a long time ago. And I was wondering if there's anybody out there that listens on Xbox Music. Used to be the Zune Music Store. So because I've gone in on my Xbox and tried to figure out where our podcast is, and I can't find it. I can't find any podcasts, and so it must be on Microsoft's website somewhere. But if anybody knows, let us know. I'd really appreciate that. I just am trying to track down where they show up and see how they rank and that kind of stuff. So that would really help us out a lot. And as usual, if you could leave a review for us on iTunes, I really appreciate that. That helps us a lot. So, all right, well, that's it for the Clive Barker podcast. This was episode 53, Cabal. Have a good night.